This podcast is a work of historical interpretation. While we strive for accuracy, some aspects of history are open to interpretation and debate. Thank you for listening. Welcome back to Time Tellers, the podcast where we uncover history's hidden stories, forgotten moments, and sometimes, just sometimes, the ones that never really happened at all.
Like the moon landing.
No. I'm going to introduce us today because I only do that every once in a while when I remember.
Yeah,
I'm
because
Renee.
you forget who you are and who I am.
That's Dan. And today, in honor of April Fool's Day, we're diving into 4 of history's biggest hoaxes, fabrications, and or myths. From moon men, not the moon, moon men, and mechanical chess masters to an entirely imaginary country, we're looking at the stories that fooled the world, and in some cases still do. Buckle up, because history isn't always what it seems.
Moment.
Up first, we have the Great Moon Hoax of 1835. Dan doesn't know which ones I'm doing, by the way.
No, I don't. I'll just sit here and drink my Monster Rehab lemonade, and you can sit and maybe I'll steal your Sour Patch mix.
Maybe.
From which company is it? The Basket Company of Jamestown, New York.
Mm-hmm.
Sponsor us, you're local.
That's true. It's 1835 in New York City.
I wish.
The bustling streets are filled with the chatter of newspaper hawkers selling the latest edition of The Sun.
What is The Sun?
One of the city's most popular newspapers. But this issue isn't just about politics or crime. It's about the moon. Over a series of 6 articles, The Sun reported that famed astronaut Sir John Herschel had used an advanced telescope to discover an entire civilization on the moon.
Oh, boy.
And we're not just talking about craters and rocks. This was a fully developed world, complete with rivers, forests, bipedal beavers, and even a race of bat-winged humanoids called Vespertilio Homo.
Oh, so this is before the Nazis took over the moon.
Oh, my God.
You didn't hear that one?
No.
That's where they escaped to in World War II.
Okay. People were obsessed. The articles spread like wildfire, with other newspapers picking up on the story. Readers were convinced that Herschel had cracked the biggest scientific discovery in history. Remember, we're talking 1835. Here's an excerpt from the New York Sun's Great Moon Hoax article, which was published in August of 1835. Quote, "We have at length the happiness of making known to the public, and more particularly to the scientific world, authentic and incontestable particulars of an immense telescope recently constructed by Dr. John Herschel. By means of this prodigious instrument, the moon, a planet of our solar system, has become the theater of discoveries surpassing all human antecedents."
It is not a planet.
This was 1835, but you are correct. That's why I kind of smirked.
It was not a planet even in 1835. It was a moon. They never called it a planet then.
Well, that's what the Sun reported. I didn't write the article. Another excerpt describes the supposed moon inhabitants. Quote,
Was there cheese too?
"They appeared to be rational beings,
As opposed to irrational?
covered except on the face with a short and glossy copper-colored hair and having wings composed of a thin membrane. They were undoubtedly innocent and happy creatures." Unquote.
That doesn't sound very...
Other newspapers, like the New York Herald, raised doubts about this story. But Locke's own admission would ultimately uncover the truth. Because, of course, it was all a hoax. Herschel had nothing to do with it. Reporter Richard Adams Locke wrote the articles, and the quote-unquote scientific details were entirely fabricated. Locke admitted the whole thing was satire, meant to poke fun at wild astronomical theories of the time. The hoax wasn't officially exposed for weeks, and even after that, some people refused to believe it wasn't real. So why did the sun do it? Well, that answer is simple. Money. Money, money, money.
Speaking of money,
okay,
don't touch me on recordings.
Since newspapers were sold for 1 cent per copy, this surge in sales would have generated thousands of extra dollars.
And the Newsies would have been happy.
I feel like this was before that time period. Newsies took place,
Newsies,
that was
the
like
movie
18...
took then all that stuff. That was like right at the 20s. But there were still Newsies then.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was like the 19... Okay.
Yeah,
no, it was. That's what the hawkers were.
Yeah, there was still...
Yeah.
Yeah.
But thousands of extra dollars is a significant amount of money in 1835.
It still is.
Yeah. The hoax helped the newspaper nearly double its circulation, reportedly growing from around 8,000 to over 19,000 copies sold per day, making it the most widely read newspaper in the world at that time. The story boosted newspaper sales like never before, proving that sensationalism sold, and arguably setting the stage for what we now call fake news. Even after the hoax was exposed, the Sun did not suffer financial losses. Oh, no, no, no. In fact, it cemented itself as a dominant newspaper, proving that sensational stories could drive sales, a practice that later evolved into yellow journalism in the late 19th century.
Explain to our listeners what yellow journalism is.
Sensationalist stories.
Just
getting a rise out of people.
Just, we got to specify some things sometimes.
That's just not a term we hear anymore, but it's still definitely. On to our next. The Mechanical Turk, a chess-playing illusion. Do you play chess?
Not anymore.
Let's go back again to the 18th century and meet a chess master like no other. One that wasn't even human. Imagine this. You step into a grand hall in Vienna in 1770, and there, before you, sits a wooden cabinet. On top of it is a life-size automaton, the Mechanical Turk, dressed in elaborate robes and a turban.
Sounds racist.
It was 1770.
Well, then, was that normal fashion at the time, or was it still making fun of?
Oh, it was definitely making fun of.
Okay, just making sure.
Here's the twist. It can play chess. Not just play, but win. Over the years, it would go up against some of the greatest minds of the time, including Napoleon Bonaparte and Benjamin Franklin. Yes, that Benjamin Franklin. How is this possible? Had humanity invented artificial intelligence centuries before computers? Nope. The truth is much more clever. Inside the wooden box, hidden beneath gears and mechanisms, was a human chess master controlling the automaton. By shifting their position, they could remain unseen while secretly directing the Turk's moves. It was an illusion, but so well executed that it fooled audiences for nearly 80 years before being exposed. So I'm assuming there's more than one chess master.
Yeah.
So, who do you think exposed this hoax?
Ben Franklin.
No.
Napoleon.
Nope. No. One more guess.
The man in the box.
No. It was exposed by no other than Edgar Allan Poe in 1836. through his essay, Mausol's Chess Player, where he argued that a person, not a machine, controlled its moves.
Speaking of Edgar Allan Poe, listen to the Lighthouse coming soon.
His analysis...
A one-person musical based on an unfinished poem by Edgar Allan Poe.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes more sense. I was like, is there more to it? Okay.
I sent you that, didn't I?
I don't think so. His analysis was later confirmed by John Kersley Mitchell in 1840. The Turk was originally built in 1770 by Wolfgang von Kempelen and later owned by Johann Nepomuk Mausol, who toured with it for years, fooling audiences until the trick was finally revealed. So again, why do it? Besides money. It was a spectacle, a show of ingenuity and a mystery. It also made its creators quite a bit of money, of course, while it toured Europe. While exact attendance numbers are unknown, estimates suggest that tens of thousands of people witnessed the Turk in action, given its long-running popularity in major cities like Vienna, Paris, London, and New York. Today, the Mechanical Turk serves as a reminder that even the most advanced-looking technology can have a simple trick behind it. The third hoax is probably one I would think a lot of people might be familiar with. I hope.
Your Sour Patch mix, and if it's Sour Patch Kids or not?
No.
Oh, okay.
I did ask if people at work knew this one, and I got a lot of blank stares, so maybe it's just history people might remember this. Or radio people might remember this. Oh, not remember it, but because they probably weren't alive, but know of it, I mean.
Are you referring to H.G. Wells' Journey to the Center of the Earth?
No.
Oh, darn.
I am referring to something similar, but not. You'll know. It's...
I need at least some kind of a hint, other than people might or might not know it.
Orson Welles?
Yeah, but I already mentioned the radio play of Journey to the Center of the Earth.
Yeah, not that one.
But that's the only one that matters.
The War of the Worlds.
Oh, you mean those aliens?
Yes. Radio panic, mass hysteria, or media myth.
Were they legal aliens?
Good question. Now, let's jump ahead.
What color were they?
I would assume green.
Then they weren't legal.
Let's jump ahead to Halloween night, 1938.
That means you're older then, for jumping ahead to Halloween.
1938. I was not alive. You might have been.
Don't let me take your Sour Patch mix away.
Okay, let's jump ahead to Halloween night, 1938.
What are you doing over there?
I'm waiting for you to remove your hand from the sound effects.
Why?
Because you're going to play them. They're going to be in my ear, but you're going to mysteriously edit them out so that when I say something, I sound like a crazy person.
You don't need any help at that.
Families gathered around their radios, tuning into CBS's regularly scheduled programming. I can't say that word. Regularly. I really can't say it.
Are you not regular?
Suddenly, a special news bulletin cuts in.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving toward the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Pearson of the observatory at Princeton confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of Ramon Raquello, playing for you in the Meridian Room of the Parks Plaza Hotel, situated in downtown New York.
Chaos erupts. People reportedly run from their homes, believing an alien invasion is underway. Or did they?
Uh-oh.
The 1938 radio broadcast of The War of the Worlds by Orson Welles fooled many because it sounded like a real news report. And remember, this is during a time period where most people got their news from either the radio or newspapers. That was your only options, or word of mouth. So a lot of people, and radio was the new technology. So, like, it was everybody who could had a radio. And remember, this is during the Great Depression, when FDR is doing his fireside chats, like, on the regular. So, this was their TV before TV, and before internet, before streaming services, and all that stuff.
How did people survive?
They read.
And had 100 kids.
Yeah. So what made this radio story seem so real? The show started with music, but was like it would normally do, like the show that they were listening to, but was interrupted by urgent news about explosions on Mars. Actors spoke like honest reporters and scientists, making it sound live. The quote-unquote news claimed Martians landed on New Jersey and used heat rays to destroy towns. They used realistic sound effects like sirens, gunfire, and cut-off radio transmissions, make it sound even scarier.
You're already making it sound really scary.
There was reports of New York City being evacuated. That was part of the news report, quote unquote.
That's impossible.
Well, you got to remember, a lot of people listening all over the country may never have even seen photos of New York City, let alone been there. Yes, Orson Welles' War of the Worlds radio broadcast did really happen. That part's not a hoax. We have recordings of it still to this day. We have. That was aired. Some listeners were startled, understandably, but the idea that the entire nation spiraled into hysteria...
37.
Oh, so it had just been built.
March 34 to December 37.
So the Lincoln Tunnel had just been built.
Yeah.
So that part, like everybody going into mass hysteria, that's exaggeration. In fact, this is a twofer. In fact, the War of the Worlds broadcast, which told of the Martians invading, was fictional. That was a hoax. That was a joke. It was meant as a Halloween prank. And Wells would come out later and explain that it was a prank. The aftermath we commonly hear about today is also incorrect. Most Americans actually missed the broadcast or tuned in late, which was also problematic, and some of them did panic a little because they missed the beginning where I believe it's announced that this is not real. Like, this was a story. I don't know. I can't remember exactly how they announced it, but if you tuned in late, you missed that. Newspapers, frustrated by the rising popularity of radio, because that's their competition at this point, sensationalized the panic to discredit the medium. Like, hey, look, they don't know what they're doing, and everybody went crazy over it. Listen to the newspapers. We are the authorities situation, right? Reports of mass evacuations were greatly exaggerated, and while some listeners were genuinely alarmed, the reality was far tamer than the legend. But the legend's fun, right? Fun to think about. A 1940 study by Hadley Cantrill estimated that about 1.2 million people were frightened or disturbed by this news, quote unquote, but only a fraction panicked and ran out of their homes. Probably those in, New Jersey probably had that reaction, if anyone. There are documented reports of listeners calling police stations, newspapers, and other radio stations. Some notable first-hand accounts were the phone lines getting jammed with people calling out the authorities for information or to say goodbye to loved ones, thinking that this was the end. A woman in Pittsburgh reportedly ran into a church service and screamed, "New York has been destroyed. It's the end of the world." Some letters sent to newspapers and to Orson Welles himself described how listeners had prayed, packed bags, or even fled their homes. In Newark, New Jersey, this makes sense. Reports say over 2,000 calls flooded the police station in less than an hour. Because if I heard that on the radio, especially then, I would have been like, what? And I probably would have called the police too. And because of this, the next day, Welles gave a press conference where he seemed genuinely surprised by the panic, however great or small that was, saying, quote, "I am terribly sorry if anyone was frightened," unquote. So, in a way, the real hoax wasn't necessarily his broadcast. It was the myth of the hysteria that followed. So, like I said, a twofer.
Yeah.
So fun.
Sorry, I got distracted.
Not even 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, last hoax of history's greatest hoaxes. There's so many. I just randomly picked 4 that I really hadn't heard much about, except for, of course, the last one. The fake nation of Poyas. Poyas. Yeah, I believe that's how you say that. Now, imagine packing up your life to start fresh in a new country with rich land, bustling cities, and a bright future. Sounds tempting, right?
Yeah.
That's precisely what hundreds of British citizens did in the 1820s, when Scottish adventurer Gregor McGregor convinced them to move...
That's an original name.
I know. Convinced them to move to Poyas, a paradise he claimed to have discovered in Central America.
Central America as in Mexico or as in Colorado?
No. That's in the next...
Oh,
Colorado?
Okay. I'd say Colorado's like right in the center of the country.
No, like Central America, like Central...
Well, that's like I said, Mexico. Mexico's Central America.
Mexico is part of North America.
Okay.
I am a geography teacher. He sold land grants, printed Poyasian currency, and even provided an official-looking guidebook. There's just one problem. Poyas didn't exist. He claimed it was a prosperous colony on the Mosquito Coast, which is now part of modern-day Honduras and Nicaragua. When settlers arrived, they found nothing but inhabitable jungle, no cities, no infrastructure, just wilderness. The climate, of course, being that it's Central America, was hot, humid, and full of, mosquitoes? Hence the name Mosquito Coast.
Yeah.
Many died of disease or starvation. Malaria, yellow fever, and dysentery spread quickly because of, mosquitoes. One survivor wrote, quote, "The air itself felt like a poison, thick and full of death," unquote. So this is in 1823. So this is like very early on. Well, I wouldn't say very early on, but there were natives living there. In 1823, after Gregor McGregor's fraudulent Poyas scheme, the British government issued warnings to prevent further loss of life and financial ruin. These warnings were spread throughout government notices and press releases, alerting the public to the deception of the Poyas venture. The government's intervention halted further immigration to the fictitious territory and curtailed investments in McGregor's fraudulent bonds and land certificates. Despite this, McGregor escaped to France and attempted the same scam again, never facing justice, and he died wealthy. That tracks. Yeah. Another survivor later described the situation. "We arrived expecting paradise, but found nothing but death." And this is just like sad on so many levels. This isn't a funny one. This is like the big bad scary, like it's already scary enough, especially in the 1820s, to just jump on a boat and go to a different country. But Imagine if you're around that time and you were like immigrating to the British colonies of North America and you're hearing about this and you're like, I'd be second guessing some things, right?
Yeah.
The Poyas scheme remains one of history's most devastating frauds, leading to hundreds of deaths and exposing the danger of unchecked colonial schemes. So currently, I'm reading one of my many books that I'm reading. I'm reading Fake History From Mozart's Murder to Cleopatra's Asp by Graham Donald. This book explored wildly accepted historical myths and inaccuracies, shedding light on how certain falsehoods became entrenched in our understanding of history. It delves into the various misconceptions, such as the true circumstances surrounding Mozart's death and the myths about Cleopatra's demise, aiming to help separate fact from fiction. And not so much fiction necessarily, it's more myth, in my opinion. Like, Joan of Arc is one of the chapters as well.
Yeah.
There's also Lies My Teacher Told Me by James W. Lowen. It is a widely respected book that critiques how American history is taught in schools. It challenges common myths and omissions in the textbooks, arguing that history is often presented in a simplified, nationalistic, and sometimes misleading way. The book is mainly accurate in its historical claims, but it does have a perspective that influences how it presents information. Some critics say that it's left-leaning, but I don't really buy that because history's history. If you're basing it off of like actual factual information, like that's it. Then there is Debunking History, 152 popular myths exploded. By Ed Rayner and Ron Stapley. Examines common historical misconceptions, offering factual corrections on topics like significant wars and revolutions. While informative, some interpretations of American history have been critiqued for a British bias. It's a helpful resource, but should be read critically, which is true of almost anything. Everything. Not almost. Scratch that. Everything. But I just want to throw out those 3 books in case anybody... And then, of course, we have, like, hundreds of TV shows out there.
Only hundreds?
I don't know. I wasn't about to go through them. I just kept thinking of Mythbusters.
Go through them all.
Yep.
Mythbusters, White Rabbit Project.
Keep going.
Well, White Rabbit Project was Carrie Torrey and Grant from Mythbusters.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really good one.
Yeah. I love Mythbusters.
And then when they brought Mythbusters back with those other guys, that last one season, and then Mythbusters Jr.
As we've seen today, hoaxes and historical myths had shaped the way we see the past. Sometimes for entertainment, like 3 of these were, somewhat interesting, didn't really do any damage, for the most part. Sometimes for profit, I would say almost all for profit, and sometimes just because people love a good story. From moon men to chess-playing robots, fake nations to overblown panics, history is filled with tales that weren't quite what they seemed. But in a way, that's what makes history fun. Learning to separate fact from fiction. And it doesn't mean these stories are stories we shouldn't tell. We just have to remember that they're not exactly what happened. Kind of like historical fiction. When you're reading a historical fiction book. Like, I just read one based on the 1916 shark attacks. It was really well done. Now I'm blinking. Let me get that title real quick. Because since I'm mentioning it, I feel like I should give you the name of it. It's part of my 52 book challenge, if anybody does that. And it is called Silent Came the Monster by Amy Hill Hirth. And like I said, it is the novel of the 1960 Jersey Shore shark attacks. And I thought it was pretty well done from what research I've done on that. And I've also read Jaws, which was loosely is inspired by those attacks. So next time you hear a story that sounds a little too strange to be true, maybe, just maybe, it's worth digging into a little deeper. Happy Fool's Day. Oh, no. Let me start that. Happy April Fool's Day, everyone. And remember, history is full of surprises.
I think I might have to get going somewhere.
Oh, where do you have to go?
Down to the lake. There's this blue stuff all over the place. I'm going to go home and swing by there on my way.
Oh, well, that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
You'll have to let me know what you find.
Yeah, I'll call you.
Okay.
I'll make sure I call you. Don't worry.
Sounds good. I look forward to that phone call.
Yeah.
This has been Time Tellers. I hope you liked our April Fool's special. We will let you guys hear us next week. Bye.